Hey everybody, welcome to another lesson of learning Japanese. Today we're going to cover x no de y as because of x, y. So we've actually covered how to say because of x, y before, and in that case we use the particle kara as meaning kind of because basically, and this is pretty much the same thing. These two forms are commonly seen as interchangeable, but there is a distinction to be known. So in the case of using x kara y, the kara there is making your speech sound a bit more casual, and when we're using x no de y, this is going to be interpreted as subtly more polite. And because of this politeness that we're establishing here with no de, when we use x no de y, y cannot be a command. So basically we're just adhering to that general politeness and avoiding a situation in which it could be considered rude, and that situation would be y being a command to your addressee. Additionally, in contrast to x no de y being a polite form, we're going to have a rule in which x, the first clause, is almost always in its plain form, even though this is a polite sentence, and the reason behind this is because y is going to be in its polite form already, so we don't need x to be in the polite form as well. If you were to use x no de y and x and y were both in their polite form, then it's going to be actually a bit too polite, and at times that's not going to be your intention as the speaker, so that is a very important thing to make note of. Okay, so that's the basic introduction to x no de y as meaning because of x, y. It's very similar to kara, it's more polite, and it has some intricacies that you need to make note of so that you don't sound too rude or too polite actually. So with that being said and done, let's go into some examples now and get a more intuitive idea of how this works. So for our first example sentence, we have the line Mada natsuyasumi na no de mainichi tanoshimitai desu. So what is this sentence saying? It's basically saying that because it's still summer vacation, I want to have fun every day. It's a pretty selfish person, but let's just leave it at that. So probably the first thing to make note of here that hasn't been mentioned yet is in the first part of the sentence where x would be in the formula x no de y. Before the connecting word no de, we have Mada natsuyasumi na. So what the particle na is doing right after natsuyasumi is it's just being a part of this grammar construct, because when we're using no de and the first part of the grammar construct, the x, is going to end with either a noun such as natsuyasumi or a na adjective, then we're going to have to put na right after that actual word and connect it to no de before we connect it to the second part of the sentence. So here, because natsuyasumi is a noun, then we're going to have to add the na right after it before we put no de after it. So now let's break down the whole sentence bit by bit. First up we have mada, which basically means still here. We have natsuyasumi, which means summer vacation, so still summer vacation. Then we have the particle na. It doesn't really translate to anything with a actual definition, it's just there as a helping particle basically. After na we have no de, which is gonna translate to because here, so because it's still summer vacation. And now we move on to the second part of the sentence, so mainichi, and mainichi basically means every day. Right after mainichi we have tanoshimitai, and this is going to be the Thai form of the verb tanoshimu, which means to have fun. After tanoshimitai we just have desu to end the sentence, which is pretty normal. We're familiar with desu following after the Thai form of a verb. Then makes the whole second part of the sentence basically I want to have fun every day. And if we connect that with no de and we connect that with the first part of the sentence, then it's going to be Mada natsuyasumi na no de mainichi tanoshimitai desu. And that's going to mean because it's still summer vacation, I want to have fun every day. For our next example sentence, we have the line Sugoku nemukatta no de shukudai wa dekinakatta. And what this sentence is saying is basically because I was sleepy, because I was really sleepy, I couldn't do the homework. So let's break this sentence down bit by bit. First up we have the word sugoku, which is going to be an adverb that is modifying the adjective right after it, and it basically translates to really or very. So after sugoku we have nemukatta, and nemukatta is the past plain form of the adjective nemui, which means to be sleepy or sleepy. So sugoku nemukatta is going to be was really sleepy. So we know how everything works there, the grammar and the conjugations, because we've covered adjective conjugations in a previous video. And after nemukatta is going to be no de. We don't need the na in this case because it's not a na adjective, it's an e adjective, and it's not a noun either, it's an e adjective, so just no de right after it. Right after no de we have shukudai, and shukudai is just homework. Then we have wa dekinakatta, and here it's wa because we have the negative scope, because the verb that follows right after it is dekinakatta, which is the negative form of to be able to do, so it was not able to do because it is in its negative form, and then that negative form is in its past plain form. So できなかった is was not able to do, so 宿題はできなかった is was not able to do the homework. So if we put that all together, we have すごく眠かったので宿題はできなかった and that is gonna be because I was really super sleepy, I was unable to do the homework. For our next example sentence, we have the line 来年日本へ行くので日本語を学んでいます. So this sentence is saying because I am going to Japan next year, I am studying Japanese. So let's break this sentence down bit by bit. First up, we have the word rainen, which means next year. So this is an indication of time. We don't have to have the particle ni right after it to mark it as a temporal object or entity or whatever, because I'm not sure if there's an explanation, but it's kind of just like when you say ashita, which means tomorrow, you don't have to say ashita ni. When we have these really specific dates that are basically just like tomorrow or next year or something like that, we don't usually we don't really need the particle ni to mark them as temporal entities or whatever. So right after rainen we have nihon, which is Japan. Then for Japan we do need to have a marker for it because it's a location. So after nihon we have e, so that's marking Japan as the location or the destination for the verb that's about to come, which is going to be iku, and iku is going to be in its plain dictionary form because as I said in the beginning of this video, that's how it's usually going to be when you're using x no de y. X is usually going to be in the plain form and y is going to be the polite one. So right after no de we have nihongo, which is Japanese, and then we have the particle o, which is marking Nihongo, Japanese, as the direct object of the verb that's about to come, which is manabu. And manabu means to study, to learn, basically, and this is in its te form, manande, and it's followed by imas, which is basically a helping verb, I believe we would call it. So manande imas means is learning or is studying, so this second part of the sentence here means I am studying Japanese. The I here is the implicit subject, basically. So if we take that and we put it together with the first part of the sentence and the node, we have because I am going to Japan next year, I am studying Japanese. Okay, so that's that whole sentence right there. Let's note one more important thing before we finish this up. So it's really important to note that when we have two clauses and we connect them with a conjunction that is like kara or node or toki ni in such a way that it designates one clause as the subordinate clause and one clause as the main clause. Here with node we see that the first clause is going to be the subordinate clause and the second one is going to be the main clause, and it's because of that that we only have the second clause in its polite form and the first one can be in its plain form because that's the subordinate one and it kind of just follows along with the main one. So if the main one is in the polite form, then the whole sentence is going to be polite. But another really important thing to note here is that in the case that we do have a subordinate clause and we have a main clause and both of those clauses have their own respective subjects, then we are going to mark the subject in the subordinate clause with ga instead of wa. And in the case of the last example that we just did, it wouldn't really apply to that because the two subjects of the clauses were both the same thing. It was me, the speaker, talking. I am going to Japan next year, so I am currently studying Japanese. But in the case that it wasn't the same subject, such as I am going to Japan next year, so my friend is teaching me Japanese or something like that, then we would use the particle ga for that first part to describe me going to Japan, and then wa for the friend teaching me Japanese. And that is a very important thing to note, so yeah, do remember that. And so yeah, that is how we use node as meaning because, basically, and we use it in this style to mean because x, y, and it's very similar to kara. It has its differences though, and it is worth knowing because it is pretty frequent.